Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Shallow End. I'm Dave Schwartz, Iowa Dave Sports Cards on Instagram. And today I'm bringing you something a little different. I had some thoughts about sports cards rattling around in my head. So I wrote them down and organized them. And what you now have before you is a sports card audio essay. Thanks for listening. Let's get started. Turn Your Cards Over, an audio essay about the backs of cards by Dave Schwartz. Osborne Earl Smith. I looked at the name on the back of the card and laughed. It was card number 59 of the 1985 Donruss baseball set, and it didn't make a lick of sense. Osborne Earl Smith. To us kids growing up in St. Louis, he was simply Ozzie Smith, or the Wizard of Oz, but never Osborne. That wasn't all there was on the back of the card. According to Donruss, Osborne Earl Smith was the, quote, finest fielding shortstop in baseball, and a Gold Glove winner in 1984, 1983, 1982, 1981, and 1980. The Cardinals had him signed to a 3-year contract that would end after the 1986 season. He came to St. Louis in a trade with the Padres for Gary Templeton. And despite having already played 7 Major League seasons, he'd hit a grand total of just 7 home runs up to that point. The front of 1985 Donruss card number 59 shows Ozzie Smith just kind of standing there, perhaps waiting to charge a ground ball or to run over to second to tag out a base stealer. Other than the iconic early 1980s Cardinals pajama blue uniform, there's nothing special about this card. It's the back that makes this card interesting. I used to love the backs of sports cards. They were my history teacher and my math teacher. If sports cards were people, the front is the person you lock eyes with across the room. There are sparks, fireworks. But it's the back of the card that determines whether you're in for a one-night stand or a long-term relationship. The front of 1989 Hoops card, number 138, the legendary David Robinson rookie, if it came out today, would be made fun of for how basic it is. The Admiral is dressed in his suit and tie, holding his Spurs jersey for the first time. It's basically a press conference image. The front was notable only because Robinson was a rookie and the card might have some financial value. The back? That's where it gets interesting. That's where his story comes to life. That's where we learn, some of us for the first time, that Robinson grew 7 inches while enrolled at the United States Naval Academy. He played just 1 year of high school basketball. The most insane Robinson stat on the back of 138 is that he finished his college career with 516 blocks. Now, why does that matter? Because if you're a curious person, if you're someone who likes to learn, you'll wonder where those 516 blocks rank on the NCAA's all-time list of career blocks. And the answer is 3rd. Okay, that's impressive, but so what? Mississippi State's Jarvis Ronado holds the all-time NCAA record with 564 blocks, nearly 50 more than David Robinson. The reason this matters so much is because for the first 2 years of Robinson's college career, the NCAA did not keep blocks as an official stat, which means, thanks to the back of Hoops card number 138 and a little curiosity, you can learn that David Robinson's 516 career blocks took place across just his junior and senior seasons, which is bonkers. The back of sports cards tell us why players matter beyond the financial value of a card. It connects eras, Walter Payton retired after the 1987 season, but Topps Football still made him a record breaker card in its 1988 set that included these words on the back. Walter retired at the conclusion of the 1987 season after setting NFL record with 110 rushing TDs. The former mark of 106 was set by Hall of Famer Jim Brown 1957 to 1965. Walter completed career with NFL record 16,779 yards on 3,821 rushes. Many of us knew that Peyton broke Jim Brown's all-time rushing record, but I had forgotten about the all-time touchdown mark. This isn't just a card, it's a historical document. The card came out in 1988. It honored Peyton, it recognized Jim Brown, who had retired more than 2 decades earlier, and it exists today as a primary document of sports history. It's insulting when sports cards don't put enough thought into the back of a card. I'm looking at you, Panini. I want stats or information or fun facts. There are exceptions, of course. Cards created by Arena Design, for example, are considered by some to be artistically visual masterpieces, and I respect that. But with exceptions, such as Dick Perez and Stadium Club, most cards don't exactly invoke Van Gogh or Leibovitz. That's why the back of the card is so important. I would argue it goes beyond that the back of the card has a responsibility to, at a minimum, communicate useful information about athletes, and even beyond that, to build and preserve the historical record. And speaking of connecting generations, I've talked and written before about my appreciation for Rickey Henderson's career. Willie McCovey's Hall of Fame career began in 1959. Albert Pujols' ended 63 years later in 2022. Rickey Henderson's career intersected with each of them. Henderson's major league career ended after the 2003 season, but he wanted to keep playing. And Upper Deck, believing that it was possible, put him in their 2004 base set. 2004 Upper Deck baseball card number 188. Alas, Henderson was done. But flip over card number 188 and you'll see the only pack-pulled baseball card that captures every season of Henderson's career, which began in 1979. You might need a magnifying glass to read all that tiny type. By the way, did you know that Henderson wasn't the only major leaguer to play from 79 through 2003? The other was relief pitcher Jesse Orosco, except he didn't get a final card with his career stats. But if you look at the back of card number 403 in 2003 Topps Total Silver, the Jesse Orosco card, you'll see a sentence that begins with these 12 words. The man who has pitched in the most games in MLB history. Jesse Orosco is not in the Hall of Fame, nor should he be. He should, however, be remembered for pitching in 1,252 Major League Baseball games. That's 350 more than Cy Young. The backs of sports cards help us honor accomplishments. They make the unmemorable memorable. They remind us why players are interesting, why they matter, why sports are more fun when we pay attention to more than just the superstars. While in school, I struggled in math. I couldn't keep the formulas and terminology straight in my head. I would get good grades in history, English, and even science, but if I could eke out a C+ in geometry or trigonometry, it was just about as proud as I ever saw my parents of me. Despite this, something funny happened when I took standardized tests like the PSAT, ACT, or GRE. I scored higher in math than any other section. The math sections of standardized tests were stripped down versions of what we did in school, sticking mostly to basic concepts and rote memorization. There was no time to think, just do. It was all application. It was the kind of math I learned by reading the backs of sports cards, line by line, over and over. Thousands of cards that were teaching me equations and formulas I was too blind to realize I was actually learning. From the back of a baseball card, I learned that earned run average was calculated by multiplying the number of earned runs allowed by a pitcher by 9, then dividing by the total number of innings pitched. Batting average was an easy one, but on base percentage forced me to hold multiple numbers in my head simultaneously: hits, walks, total plate appearances, but remove at bats. Sometimes card companies made it challenging, but that was good because we learn the best when information isn't just handed to us. Take 1987 Fleer basketball. The stats in the back tell you how many games Michael Jordan played, total points scored, and points per game. But it didn't separate out 2 and 3-point field goals made or free throws. So if you wanted to figure that out, you got out a pen and paper and began working through the possibilities. If Jordan shot, say, 600 free throws and made X amount, then for his field goal percentage to be Y, you had to have hit this many 2-pointers or this many 3-pointers. And while Fleer gave you points and points per game, it gave you only the total number of rebounds, assists, steals, and blocks without averages. So on Michael Jordan's 1987 Fleer card, number 59, you had to figure out those averages for yourself. Math. The backs of sports cards didn't just make learning fun. It would be a lazy cop-out to say that. What the backs of sports cards did do is make learning inevitable. You either learn to run the numbers in your head fast and accurately, or you were left behind. Because both you and your friends would know that when it came to sports, you didn't know what you were talking about. More than anything, the backs of sports cards are storytellers that demand effort from its audiences. The front of the sports card says, "Do you like me? Do you think I'm pretty? If so, check this box." The backs say, "Look, if we're going to spend time together, you've got to get some things straight. Number one, don't be an idiot. Number two, I expect you to be curious and think for yourself a little bit. Stand up for what you believe and figure out what you think is important. Then we can decide if we're going to have a relationship." I wrote this essay because I want us, members of the hobby, to remember how much the back of a sports card matters. What it has meant, means, and can continue to mean as long as we're willing to turn the card over for reasons other than looking for print lines and dimples. There are stories there, knowledge, fun, entertainment. And I'm not saying this is the most serious issue in the world or even in the hobby. It's not even close. What I am saying, and what I'd like you to hear and take away from this, is that it's important to preserve the parts of this hobby that are good, and dare I even say, pure. The backs of sports cards are givers. We rarely, if ever, buy a card because of what's on the back of it. Yet there it is. Every card has a back just waiting to be looked at. That's why it's so cool that Topps still includes full stats on the back of its flagship and Topps Chrome baseball sets, and why it's so frustrating that so many of Topps' other products and nearly every Panini SKU receive so little thought or production effort. To them, it comes across as a nuisance, as an afterthought, when it could be so much more. I have no idea why Don Russ, instead of writing Ozzie Smith on the back of his cards, chose to go with Osborne Earl Smith. But I'm grateful they did, because in doing so, they reminded us, they taught us that he has people who named him. And that, who knows, maybe Ozzie had an Uncle Earl who the family loved and admired and wanted to carry on his name. In that moment, to include players' full names, Don Russ made the players more human, more like us. Sports cards are only just cardboard if we choose to let them be just cardboard. So let's not let it come to that. Let's make this hobby worth our time, energy, and money. Let's remember, when we strip away all the pretense, let's remember what the backs of sports cards can be. They are teachers, they are knowledge, and they are vessels of history that connects each and every one of us to each other and to the players we collect. This is The Shallow End. Until next time, thanks for listening.